I'm Holly Robinson Peete, and I am pleased to be working with Cigna Healthcare on a podcast called The Visibility Gap. In this episode, we're talking about working people who are also primary caregivers and the ways that they can feel unseen at work. There just aren't enough hours in the day for caregivers, and that's all caregivers. It could be your kids, it could be your parents, it could just be taking care of someone you really love. As a working mother myself, I'm looking forward to digging deeper on this topic. Listen to this stat. 1 in 3 women and 60% of mothers with young children spend 5 hours or more a day on housework and caregiving. 5 hours a day is at least another part-time job. And this situation is impacting individuals and companies in ways we're just beginning to understand. It's a big issue. 61% of all employees are caregivers. We need a plan. This podcast is here to help business leaders and HR professionals see the unseen problems of the people around them. In this episode, we'll meet with people who have been impacted by the balancing act of caregiving and work and have experts share their insights. We're very lucky to have 2 people here who are able to talk about their experiences in their own world. So thank you for joining us, Ivy and Kelli. Ivy Bryant is a corporate executive who is also a single mother to a daughter. And Kelli Royals works as a project manager at a male-dominated shipyard. She's a mother to 5. Thank you for being here, ladies. I'm so excited to talk to you. Let's start with you, Kelli. First of all, I need to know what it's like working on a shipyard. And what kind of ships are we talking about? Cargo, cruise ships? Tell us your work environment.
Currently, I'm working on DDG, but I have done everything.
What is DDG?
A destroyer, so it looks like a battleship, sort of.
Wow.
And I've done carriers, nuclear aircraft carriers, and submarines has been primarily my expertise as far as the ships go.
I don't even know where to begin. How do you work on those? What do you do on those ships?
Right now, as a project manager, I just align all the resources, put all the guys to work, show them what needs to be done, and make sure they get it done.
So you're kind of the boss.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I love it. You also have 5 children. I don't know how you balance all this, but you basically have a mini Navy at home.
Absolutely.
What is it like keeping work and family life afloat?
For me and my brain, honestly, being the boss at home is kind of what gives me that confidence at work, having to learn how to manage and organize everybody in the chaos. I say it's the same at work. I'm just organizing a different chaos.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. Ivy, you're a single mom.
I am.
And you're also an executive.
I am. So
what is that pressure like, balancing both of those roles?
Yeah, I think it was a process. It didn't happen overnight. I think that's what parenting is. It's like you are overwhelmed and you're not exactly sure what to expect. And I think that's what you face at work, right? Every day is different. Mm-hmm. But it was a buildup. I was a new mom and having to learn what it would be like to parent a child. And then my daughter had a chronic condition. So she was actually born with sickle cell disease. So, when you think about the sickle cell community itself, every child, every situation is different, right? So having to balance and manage at home as well as to come back to work and drive a team, all of it sort of goes hand in hand at one point. So Kelli, I definitely agree with you. The chaos at home is a different type of chaos at work.
Yeah, I mean, you both leave work and then you basically go home and keep on working. Do you think that your companies actually see your balancing act?
Absolutely not.
They don't?
No. I've worked for a couple different companies now, and I think it's very ignored. Like, we don't want to talk about that, where, it's the bottom line. Let's get the project done. I feel that a lot in the smaller company I'm in now. The large corporate company I worked for, there was probably some more cushion because there was a lot more people, to pick up any slack. But right now, the small company, there's no extras in there. You are the person, the one that everyone's calling, the one that needs to make the answers and the decisions need to happen.
And how do you self-advocate? How do you let people know the things that you're dealing with or going through at work and at home? What does that look like?
Absolutely. I don't know that I've figured that out all the way, but I just have to speak up for myself. I'm struggling with other things in the background, and kids having ADHD and autism and myself are things that I haven't learned how to advocate for myself yet on. But every day's like a new, all right, in this situation, how do I want to handle it? How do I want to communicate that this is what's going on and this is how we need to do that? And I'm getting there. Sometimes it's just having the right people around you.
I think it's such an interesting question and perspective. I think for me, I see the privilege that I actually had. I worked in the healthcare industry. And so before it was corporate responsibility to think about mental wellness or to think about work-life balance and to really talk about it in the workplace, I actually didn't want to be seen. I didn't want my challenges at home to be seen. At work, I was always very driven. I was always, coming out of my MBA program. I was this corporate Barbie. I wanted to present myself and my brand as always being prepared and able to take on things. And when I became a mom, I actually was just turning my career, was starting to shape. I didn't want people to even know that I was a single mom. So Why
didn't you want people to know that?
Because as a African-American female showing up in very white male spaces, I didn't want them to think that I couldn't handle what the responsibility I was looking for. I wanted to always be that standout, that value-driven employee, and I didn't want them to think that my home life would be an obstruction to me working and building up my career. And I remember I actually didn't really talk about this for about 10 years. And I remember sharing this at sort of a lean-in circle at work. When I first found out I was pregnant, I went out to Zales and I bought myself a little fake wedding ring. And I used to do a lot of dinners with our sales team. And it was a very family-oriented work environment, but I didn't think that applied to me as a single Black female. And I just wanted to be able to talk about a partner at home that was helping, taking these work trips. But it was really the support of my family. So when you ask the question about were we unseen, a lot of times I wanted my home life to be unseen. I didn't want to talk about my child's condition because I knew that not only did she depend on me to support her through her health condition, but also financially. I didn't want that to be an obstruction to me growing in my career. A lot of our time was spent in the hospitals, days at a time.
Yes, with sickle cell, that is, you spend a lot of time in the hospital and there's all these treatments and you don't know when it's going to trigger. I have many friends who have children dealing with that, and it's a lot. And it's a lot of time off of work you need.
Absolutely.
How were you able to sort of let your bosses know that you needed that time?
So I think what was interesting is, and Kelli sort of alluded to, how do you advocate for yourself? I had to learn very quickly. It is a partnership. So, now leading a team, it's the expectation that you as a leader will show empathy, but also be relatable so that they feel comfortable and safe. So for me, I think you have to force yourself to sit down, to take care of yourself. And because if we aren't good, if we aren't healthy, our kids
this whole empire crumbles.
Yes.
If we're not, and
down.
even at work, especially, we have the work family and our family.
Yeah.
And then you're running, you're project managing on these ships.
In 2020, I had to go through a divorce because it was taking such a toll on my health that I was having illnesses and not knowing where they were coming from. And a lot of it was work and that significant other, but I had to really have that wake-up call that you can't keep taking care of people that are not also contributing back, that are also taking care of you.
Yeah.
But in the last 3 years, I've learned that I can still focus on work and still have my time, but I just have to pay attention. Right now in the mornings, we get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and my youngest, some mornings she wakes up and she hates the way her hair touches her jacket and she can't stand her pants.
Just sensory-wise?
Yeah, just being able to bring that into their forefront so that I know how they they need to be treated, and they know how they need to learn or be treated, because I didn't have that advocate for me when I was younger, and I don't want them to take as long as I did and to go through the health things that I did to find out what I need. And now that I know I'm autistic, I know now I have things that I have to look at if I'm overstimulated, if I've taken in too much that day, if I've done too much. But before, even in my marriage, it was kind of seen as you're being dramatic.
Of course, yeah, because you didn't have that very important piece of the puzzle to know who you were.
My brain is just different. And I know it. I've seen it in school and I've seen it at work because of the way I attack things is just so differently than everyone around me.
Right.
But that's also been my niche. Like, I've always just been different. And so once I went into a male-dominated atmosphere, I was like, I'm just different. I grew up in between my brothers. I've been rough and tough, so I understand. I know how to work hard. That's what I was taught. So do my job, keep my head down. Autism, like, just follow the rules, stay on the straight and narrow. So it kind of got me through a lot, but it has given me that sigh of relief that there is a reason that my brain ticks that way.
That's right.
And I need my kids to understand that, because not everyone around them's going to understand that.
That's
but
so
once
true.
they do, they'll be able to see their superpower. I see it as a superpower.
So do I. So do I. And for me, I remember when my son was diagnosed, it took me about 8 years to even be able to talk about that publicly, talk about autism publicly. And mind you, this was 23 years ago.
Yeah.
But I found the moment I did, it was so freeing. A whole world's open up.
Yeah.
And I always encourage people to share their stories, which is why I love this podcast so much, because I think it really helps. Every single one of us is going through something.
Yeah.
And so at work, if companies are willing to share, or people in managing positions and are willing to share their stories, I feel like that just opens up
Absolutely.
the conversation, and I just think that's so important. Have you shared at this point now, have you shared your story about your daughter with your employers?
I have. I think it's very quiet at first, right? When Peyton was diagnosed, she was 3 months old. So we knew going in that there was a risk that she would have this, right? I had the trait. We found out her dad had the trait. And so we were sort of mentally preparing. But you don't know what life is going to be like. You don't know what your needs are going to be. And every 2 or 3 months, that need might change and shift. It's very unpredictable.
And no one can really prepare you for it.
Absolutely not, because you're trying to prepare as a parent for the first time, and then you have this other compounding newness, right? Challenge. Not only am I a new parent and I'm, on maternity leave and I'm coming back to work, but now I'm going to need some additional support. It's very challenging. So I think for me, it was very quiet at first. It was very much certain people knew. Everyone didn't know. It wasn't something that you just talked about your new baby and all the new fun things that she's doing.
Yeah.
And I think you just get to the point where you finally feel like, and again, single mom, Black female, corporate setting, you have that trust circle. So it was compound. It was very small at first. And it's something that grew over time. Whereas now I am in the leadership chair. I can very comfortably talk about what my needs are.
Absolutely.
I can definitely share when there's challenges or when I need to step away.
Right.
I didn't have that initially. So I think it's something that as a leader, you have to be open to listening, but also looking for, because people don't know how to articulate what their needs are. You have to sort of proactively be there as a support partner and anticipate what they might need from you. Time away, different hours.
I would have to agree with that. I say my last 3 pregnancies I had in the shipyard, so I worked every day.
Wait a sec, what?
Until I had the babies.
Wait, hold on.
I
had
welded.
the pregnancies. You were welding while you were pregnant.
At work until the end.
You are my superhero.
Until
Right,
34 weeks. And
34 weeks you were up there welding?
Yes, ma'am. And when I came back, I had to do the same. I had to pump and breastfeed. And I did have people that understood because they had babies. But obviously, I worked around a lot of men. So they were understanding because of wives at home.
Okay.
So there was lots of funny stories stories. I remember having milk in the freezer, and one of the guys slinging the freezer door open, and my milk hit the floor, and he was like, I'm so sorry.
Does he not know that is liquid gold?
Right. But
Oh my
I
goodness.
laughed it off, and they were very helpful. But the part that was hard was the corporate side. Once I went from, so I was hourly at first, and I became a foreman and salary during the last baby. But when I was hourly, they wanted me to clock out to go pump. Like I couldn't flex my time.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't be on the clock while I pumped.
Women have been working while pregnant and in
Yes.
nursing for years.
And
Like,
women-
we need to figure this out. We need a
Absolutely.
plan.
Absolutely.
If you could give companies advice on being better caregivers themselves,
Yeah.
what would that be?
I think companies just need to have that empathy, be relatable, be open. Leaders, it's on us, right, to be able to have that open door policy where people can come in and show up a little bit as their authentic self, right?
Absolutely.
This is who I am in the workspace. This is who I am at home. So I think just being better listeners and sometimes having to probe and sometimes having to be relatable so that people are more likely to share.
Yeah.
Thank you both for speaking so honestly about your experiences. You are both super women. I am in awe of both of you and what you do. I know our listeners are better off for just you guys sharing about your professional lives and your families and how you balance both. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So we're going to shift gears a bit and bring in some experts to help us get a wider lens on the intersection of caregiving and work. I'm joined by Jackye Clayton, a human resources thought leader and inspirational speaker. She is Vice President of Talent Acquisition and DEIB at Textio. Jackye is focused on growing businesses through in-depth analysis and was named one of the 9 powerful women in business you should know. We also have Jay Van Bavel with us. Jay is an author and professor of psychology and neuroscience at NYU. Jay's research examines how social identities and morality shape the mind, brain, and behavior. His book, The Power of Us, Harnessing Our Shared Identities to Improve Performance, Increase Cooperation, and Promote Social Harmony, has become a bestseller. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, we just spoke to 2 extraordinary mothers. These women have had to overcome some huge challenges as caregivers and professionals. So this is for each of you. What struck you most about Kelli and Ivy's stories?
I think when what struck me was just their stick-to-itiveness, that they were really wanted to kept going. There was so much when I was thinking, personally, I don't know if I can do it. And just seeing the resilience was something that stood out. But the other part that stood out was how there was a structure or a fear that came, whether it was, is it me, the environment, I'm the only woman, I'm a woman of color, there were that, and I just think about the stress. I feel, how do you carry that burden and
The stress of
going?
not being able to be who you are.
Just who you are, and there's nothing, you're not going to not be who you are. And so often people don't change where they are or who they are. They change where they are in business.
Right.
But these women stuck to it for so long.
Jay, what stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, the stories of how they felt like they had to cover up their identities to manage their work environment, to avoid being stigmatized. And we know that those types of things come with a lot of a stress and burden if you can't be yourself and you don't feel like people understand where you're coming from. But for them, I think it was like a survival instinct.
Yes.
They didn't feel like they were in a safe enough environment where they were going to be supported and respected for who they were. And so, again, it was just, it's stressful, it's frustrating. It just shows how much they had to overcome to be successful.
One of my biggest takeaways was when Ivy said she went to Zales to buy that ring so that she didn't come off as your typical single Black mother
Yes.
in the workforce and how that would present itself in a corporate setting. That kind of broke my heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you hear stories like that all of the time of showing up to the company picnic with someone because they didn't want someone to know, or masking that they're a member of the LGBTQ community to not have to deal with that. There was a time where people said, I just keep my head down and I go to work. But that doesn't happen very often. We ask people to bring their whole selves to work and then penalize them for bringing their whole selves to work. And so it's so important to have that balance, because we realize you're not getting this person's best work if they have to dig into their savings, get money, go to Zales, and buy a ring.
Right. And the fact that she has a daughter with sickle cell anemia she has to take care of and may have to miss work. So not only is she putting on a ring, literally, to try to be someone else, but she's also hiding this other really big part of her life.
Yeah, the thing that struck me was when you asked them, did your colleagues know about what you were going through? And both of them just instantly said no. Even with just the parenting at home and the additional burden of that, is their colleagues were not aware of it. Their workplace was not aware of it at all. And so I think that tells you something about, these are smart women, very successful. That's them reading the environment and concluding, I can't be open about this.
And to extend to what Jay was saying, they don't know that was happening, but they do realize you're showing up at work a little later, you're getting a little bit more irritable, you're not participating as much, we're not hearing from you in meetings. And so to them, it might be a problem. They read it as a problem with your performance without realizing how can we assist this person so they can show up and we can give them the support that they need.
What are the health implications for caregivers and who not only have to take care of themselves, but also their loved ones?
Yeah, so caregiving is extremely stressful. It's an enormous burden, whether you're caring for small children or an ill relative or an adult, a parent who's struggling with something like dementia or aging. And so you get burnout just from doing that. And it's a lot for any normal human to juggle on top of a job. And so I think that's the one thing is you have to find out what people are going through, what you can do to help them. And I think that has to be an individualized thing, right? You have to understand what each person's needs are and what they're struggling with to be able to find effective solutions for them. There's not really a simple one-size-fits-all.
Yeah, there's no cookie cutter situation for that. I was a caregiver when I was 19 for my dad who had Parkinson's. And I was going to college. I was a freshman in college, and I tried to quit college so that I could just be with him and take care of him at a very young age, before I had kids, before I was married. And I just know how burnt out I was at 19 trying to go to college and then run down to the city to take care of my dad. I can't imagine what that must be like if I'm in the workforce. I didn't have to work at that time, right? Work was college, basically. But that must be just so stressful.
I remember my mother had Parkinson's. She passed in March. And just thinking, I had 2 kids in college that were trying to learn how to be adults, that I'm trying to show them how to be adults as the same time I'm trying to take care of my parents. It's a surreal experience. And at work, they're navigating and seeing that these things are happening. I just was lucky that I was able to have the conversation.
Yeah, that's a must be nice situation.
That's right.
If you actually have that. Jay, I'm curious, how does the human brain compartmentalize between work and caregiving? Is it possible? Is it healthy?
Yeah, I mean, there are times where it can be healthy. For example, like if you want to shut off your email at 5 p.m. and like go home and be with your family. But what often happens is these things start leaking into one another. And so if you're bearing a lot of stress at home, that leaks into your work life. Like you said, you show up, you're distracted, you're exhausted. I remember even having a young kid myself. I was sleep deprived for 4 years. I looked like a zombie because he didn't sleep in past 4 a.m. And so that wore me down. And my job is a job where I have to like use my brain and think. And the biggest thing you can do to destroy your cognitive abilities is just sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
And then of course it goes the other way, that if you have a really stressful job, and we're talking about, in this case, these were like very successful women, managers. They had a lot of responsibilities. They talked about like constantly driving a team. And when you're driving a team, it's not just that you're thinking big ideas, but they're responsible for like managing the emotions and stressors of all the people under them.
That's right.
And so that, is something that, you come home and you're distracted. You don't have time to make dinner. You don't have the empathic kind of space to deal with your kid who's going through, something at school. And so it kind of burns you out kind of because you're on both ends. You don't really have a reprieve or any time for yourself to restore.
So how voice was a really big thing for both Ivy and Kelli, specifically just finding a voice to self-advocate and to represent themselves in a way that was healthy. How can companies how can they make self-advocacy more approachable and less scary?
I think part of that is reminding people of the benefits that they have at work. It's really important. Almost every organization, if they offer benefits, will have like an employee assistance program that has a multitude of legal or advising or about a therapist or different things that you could do. And it's one of the most underutilized pieces at work.
Why is that? We just don't know about it, or is it not encouraged to access? This is a tool that can really help.
Part of it is because, have you seen those packages?
What, do they look like a phone
can be so
book?
big, right? They can be really hard to navigate.
Right.
Thankfully now, with things being online, you can search easier. But we don't always think that work is the place to do that. There's such a history, maybe a environment and culture of masking and hiding that you don't think of going into work or going into human resources for those things. Remember, that's what human resources is for. It doesn't always feel like it every day, but they're really there to help advocate for you and have those conversations. So that's something that's really important, of having those conversations within HR. Maybe there's a business resource person that you could talk to help work you through how to communicate with your managers or your coworkers to have those conversations.
Yeah, I'd layer onto that another challenge, in addition to just not knowing, is not feeling comfortable using those resources. So, for example, a lot of companies now offer unlimited vacation.
Right.
When they offer that, people use less vacation than they would use if they just had a standard like 3 or 4 weeks. And I'll say this just from personal experience. When I got my first job as a professor, I was about to have a baby, and I was eligible for a course release. And I knew I was eligible for it, but I didn't want to take it in my first semester because I didn't want to make a bad impression that I was slacking off on my responsibilities as soon as I arrived. And so I didn't use it. And so it was like particularly brutal for me at a really kind of stressful, important juncture of my career. And so I think it's not only helping people understand what's available to them, but creating workplace where they feel that it's important to use it.
Yes.
That if you use your vacation, you come back refreshed and you'll be better. It's an understanding that you'll retain people and you won't burn them out if it's an environment where they feel comfortable doing these things. And so there's a lot of benefits for the organization to help people take advantage of these benefits.
So, Jay, one of the things that Kelli was talking about was how her brain and how her children's brains deal with input differently than others. Are companies equipped to deal with those differences, and how can they be better at that?
Yeah, I think that's a big issue. A lot of companies and universities are thinking about how to deal with, they call it neurodiversity. It's just the complexity and differences of the ways that people think. And there's a lot of ways to deal with it. So, and I think this is really important complement to what Jackye was saying, which is it's great if you can advocate for yourself and find the language to do so, but you also need a receptive leadership and organization that's going to hear you and kind of meet you where you are and support you. And so there's a lot of things we can do. And I think a big part of it is signaling to people who work with you and under you that you're open-minded and that you're going to try to meet them where they are and find ways for them to be successful, because it's in everybody's best interest, right?
You know, one of the things that I really related to speaking with the ladies was just how we as caregivers, I took care of my dad, and at one point my dad and my son, was the sandwich generation, they call us, and just putting ourselves last, right? Not taking care of our own selves and how important it is to pour from a full cup. And what are ways that we can tell people that might be watching how important it is for them to take care of their own health in the middle of caregiving for loved ones, a parent, and working and trying to make that balance?
I always think it's important to tell people you have to take care of your child's caregiver first. It's the old saying of putting your oxygen mask on first before helping someone else. And sometimes you can offer a benefit like a self-care benefit. We, want you to take care of yourself. And so we're going to give you a little bit of a stipend that you can use for whatever you need within self-care. Another way is to actually celebrate and ask people to share their stories that they feel comfortable sharing, and celebrating that this person was able to do this thing that was outside of work, because whatever you praise is what people acknowledge. And so when you say, we care about your well-being, we want you to take self-care, but the only ones who get the awards are the ones that come in early and stay late.
Right.
you give mixed messages. So make sure that you're celebrating people who are taking care of themselves and have figured out some type of balance for themselves so that other people not only can acknowledge it, but they might want to share their stories as well, making it a part of the culture.
Yeah, and I would say that this is where leadership plays a big role, that they can establish healthy norms. So like an example for me is when I told you already, when I had a kid, when I started my job, I had a senior colleague, very successful, who brought his kids into work all the time and was very involved in caregiving. And it just made it a safe space for me to do that and feel comfortable talking about it and not having to hide it. And then our whole group, our whole culture at work really kind of started to change around that. And it was really a generational shift because previous generations did not talk about it. They were expected to just be solely focused on their work. And I think that that's something that if you're in a position of power, it's extra important that you signal these things, that you take vacations, that you strive for balance, that you care about valuing your sleep and your health and your well-being. And then I would say two other things that are a challenge for people. One is that people who are most passionate about their work get burned out faster. And so you have to actually be careful if you are really passionate because you can be the one that keeps going until you hit the wall.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Is that true?
That's true. It's the research shows. Another thing the research shows is people who are empathic are often also the people who suffer because they're absorbing the stresses of everybody around them. They're listening, they're taking perspective. They're great people to have around because other people feel heard and valued around them. But they take those on and it can burn them out. And so those are actually two things we really value at work. We love people who are passionate. We love people who are empathic. But those people actually carry enormous burdens that are unseen by others. And so sometimes the people that are most important to the whole group's success are the people who are struggling because they're carrying too much. And so we have to think about ways to make sure that those folks in particular get the oxygen mask because they're the least likely to reach out for it themselves.
You know, clearly caregiving is a purely selfless act. I mean, I do a lot of caregiving support groups in LA with our Holly Robinson Foundation. And whenever we sit down and talk to whether it's someone like me who cared for, like us, who cared for our parents with Parkinson's, and my brother also has Parkinson's now too. So, or someone taking care of someone with autism, we all have one thing in common. It's like we just keep going, right? And what I love about this podcast and just any chance I get to remind people to get their sleep, to take care of themselves, because you cannot pour from a cup with one drop of water in it. And I think that's just so important. It's clear that companies and leaders need to make sure that they create environments to make sure caregiving isn't made harder. You know, let's make it easier for people that are working in our workforce. So I just want to thank both of you for joining us. I love talking with both of you, and I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
We know it can be hard to see the invisible challenges that people we work with every day are going through, like caring for loved ones. But by practicing empathy, insight, and awareness, it is possible. Conversations like these are where we start. Join us next time when we'll be talking about how people from all walks of life can feel unseen and misunderstood, and what that means for their health and the companies they work for. I'm Holly Robinson Peete, and this has been The Visibility Gap.